Welcome. If you are watching these videos, you probably have heard about Cisco Visibility and how it reduces the complexity of your incident investigation and response tasks by tying together some of your multiple Cisco and third-party security infrastructure investments. So we're not going to talk much about that today. My name is Ben Greenbaum. I'm with Cisco's Advanced Threat Solutions team, and we're going to talk about not what visibility does, but about how you can get it. Cisco Visibility is free for users of Cisco's Advanced Malware Protection for Endpoints Cloud product and Cisco's Threat Grid Malware Analysis Cloud platform. If you are a customer of either of these products, you can log into Visibility today and set it up. I'm going to show you how. Cisco Visibility is, in its simplest description, an API aggregator. We talk to all these APIs so that you don't have to, and we do that via a modular design. Each module handles one API, some from external third-party intelligence providers, some from internal monitoring systems, and some for response capabilities offered by control technologies. And of course, some do both. In this tutorial, we will cover how to log into Cisco Visibility and how to configure those modules. We'll go through the modules for AMP for Endpoints, Threat Grid, Umbrella, and Virus Total. Accounts are needed for all of these. Visibility will work without any of them, but it works better the more of these modules you can enable. I'll talk near the end about how to get a free Virus Total account, but to get accounts for any of the other systems in the list, talk to your Cisco account manager. If you don't have an account for one of the systems right now, just skip that part of the tutorial. You can always come back to it later. Also, these instructions are valid right now. Some of these interfaces will change in the future. If you're following along at some later date and a step doesn't look the way it does in this tutorial, consult the documentation for the most recent instructions. Before and after each module configuration, I will show you an investigation in Visibility. This is to demonstrate what differences were made by the addition of each module. In your own configuration steps, you don't have to follow along with these examples. You can get to Visibility by going to any of these URLs. Pick the one that makes the most sense for your location and simply go there. There are other ways to access Cisco Visibility, of course. The ability to pivot into Visibility from the interfaces of any of the integrated products is one of the time-saving features that the tool offers. But for the purposes of this tutorial, we will start by simply putting one of these URLs into our browser bar and looking at the front page. And this is what you get, a login page where you have the choice of logging in with your AMP for Endpoints credentials or logging in with your Threat Grid credentials. Now, I recommend that if you have AMP for Endpoints credentials, you use them to log in. It simplifies the process of tying your AMP for Endpoints account and information into Visibility. If you don't, log in with your Threat Grid credentials. Now, of course, if you have both, you can do either. I recommend the first, but whichever one you pick, stick to that choice. Because these are separate visibility accounts. They're just using your product accounts to authorize you to use the service. Settings and configurations will not be consistent across both of these accounts by default unless you set them up twice. So again, pick one of your login methods, preferably AMP for Endpoints if you have it, and stick with it. And there you have it. This is the main page of Visibility. You can start entering information and doing investigations on those observables right now. What you won't get is any information about your own endpoints having seen any of these observables or the ability to pivot from here into AMP for Endpoints or Threat Grid or any of the other integrated tools. To do that, we're going to have to configure some modules. The module settings are cleverly hidden up here behind the modules label on the topmost menu bar. And here you see the 4 modules that come with Cisco Visibility by default, giving us insights into things like the Talos Intelligence Database, the AMP File Reputation Database, and more threat intelligence. But to see our own information and to get some additional pivot options, we're going to have to start adding modules. And we're going to start with an AMP for Endpoints module so that Visibility can query AMP for Endpoints on our behalf. There's instructions on how to fill out each of these configuration pages for every module. I will walk you through the AMP for Endpoints configuration step by step now. The first thing that we need to do is to pick a URL for visibility to use to make these API queries against. The default is for the North American cloud. There's also options for the Asia cloud and the European cloud. There is an option for other. There's currently no good reason to specify any other URL, so I recommend against trying to do that. Just pick the location that makes sense for your organization. Below that, we need to provide a third-party API client ID and an API key. Both of these are covered by the instructions to the right of the screen, and we're just going to follow those. Log into AMP for Endpoints and navigate to the API credentials page located under Accounts. The link takes us right to the page that we need, and we can hit the New API Credentials button. We're going to call this Cisco Visibility. And we can choose a scope, read-only or read and write. Read-only will allow us to gather information about whether any of these observables were seen by AMP for Endpoints. Read and write allows us to also add those observables to AMP for Endpoints block lists. So let's do that. Read the warning, click Create, and there you have it. Here's our third-party API client ID and our API key, both of which we require to configure the module in Visibility. Copy each of these and paste them into the appropriate locations in the visibility interface, and your module will be set up. And here we are back in Cisco Visibility with our API client ID and our API key pasted into the configuration page. We'll go ahead and click Create Module. And there it is. Our AMP for Endpoints module shows up at the bottom of the list of modules that we now have configured. If we go back and redo this investigation, we might find something different. And we certainly did. Here's a local target icon, which means that AMP for Endpoints, when queried by Visibility about this list of observables, came back and said, yes, my machines have seen one of these files, and it will show me which machine, and I can pivot directly back into AMP to look at the device trajectory for the affected endpoint. It's that simple to set this up and to get this kind of power. Back in Cisco Visibility, looking at this file, for each file, I'm now going to have multiple AMP for Endpoints options. I can see the file trajectory in the AMP for Endpoints console. I can search for this hash in the AMP for Endpoints console. And if I set the scope to read-write, I can add this file to any simple custom detections lists I might have, which gets us an immediate response capability right from the results of our investigation. Let's create a threat grid module. Let's add another module. We will select the module type of threat grid, and we can leave these at the defaults. The module name can be threat grid, and here is the URL for the North American threat grid cloud. We can also choose the European or submit an other. Again, there's no good reason right now to do that, so just pick one of these two options and create module. And that one's done. With our threat grid module created, let's click on the pivot menu for one of these files again. And now we have options to browse and search ThreatGrid for this file hash. Browse means we're going to go directly to a page that tells us everything that ThreatGrid knows about this file hash. Search means that we're going to look for a sample where the sample itself has this exact file hash. It's a small distinction, but an important one. And you do need to have a ThreatGrid portal account to be able to do either of these things. The module doesn't ask you for API credentials or anything like that. It doesn't ask you for your ThreatGrid login. You just create the module and you get these options in your dropdown, but you do have to have the ThreatGrid account because it will ask you to log in when you click on either of these things. And assuming that you do have a ThreatGrid Cloud Portal account, you'll see something like this after you log in. And here, this says, see the impact on your endpoints, enable visibility. Didn't we just do that? Well, we enabled visibility to talk to ThreatGrid. This is enabling ThreatGrid to talk to our Cisco Visibility account. So let's go ahead and click on that. We'll authorize the application here. And ThreatGrid is now authorized by Visibility to access visibility on your behalf. Going back to the ThreatGrid page for that file hash, you see now that ThreatGrid is reporting that you've had one internal target that has seen this file, and it knows that because it asks visibility, which in turn asks your AMP for endpoints installation. You can hit the pivot menu and get more information. You can investigate this artifact in visibility, and you can get all of the information about the hostname as well and take certain actions based off of those. By clicking the arrow to the right of the AMP GUID, you can even get a menu from where you can see that endpoint's device trajectory in the AMP for endpoints console. All of this is tied together by Cisco Visibility. Let's go back to Visibility and look at some more modules. Once again, let's add a new module, and this time, let's add a module for Umbrella and Umbrella Investigate. Again, we need an API token, and this time a custom Umbrella integration URL, and all of this is explained on the sidebar of the configuration page. Before we do that, let's go back to our investigation. Let's edit it. Let's add a domain to that investigation. And here we see that domain come up in the results, and we see over here that it's known to be malicious by Talos Intelligence, and that nothing else has reported on it, and that when we click on it, we have options for AMP for endpoints, Talos Intelligence, and Threat Grid. Now let's go configure that module and see if anything changes. Remember when we were setting up our AMP for endpoints integration and we could choose between read only to be able to do enrichment out of AMP for endpoints, or we could choose read write to be able to do both enrichment and response by adding files to the AMP for endpoints block list. We have a similar situation here with Umbrella, where the API token will give us the enrichment capabilities of looking up what does Umbrella know about a domain or a file, etc. And then the response capability comes from this custom Umbrella integration URL here, which will allow us to add domains to the Umbrella block list and get these threats blocked at the DNS level. Let's follow these instructions and set up both. You are going to need Umbrella platform access to make this work. Go to umbrella.com or umbrella.cisco.com and click on Login in the top right corner, and then click on Investigate in the left menu bar, and then below that, Investigate API Access. And this lists our API access tokens, of which my account currently has none. So we will create a new token. We will give it a name and click Create. And here is our new access token for use by Cisco Visibility. We go back to the Visibility configuration page and just paste that in, and then we're going to go get the custom Umbrella integration URL for the enforcement piece. Back in the Umbrella Investigate console, let's go to Policies and Integrations in the left side menus. Let's click Add, and we're going to also name this Cisco Visibility. And now remember, we have to do this twice only because we're getting two distinct and different functions out of Umbrella Investigate and Umbrella. So click on Cisco Visibility or whatever you named it, hit Enable while we're here, grab this custom URL, copy it, save this here, and then go back to the Cisco Visibility module configuration page, paste that in where that belongs, and hit Create Module. And now we have Umbrella successfully in our list of configured modules. If you go back to that investigation that we just added the domain to and reload it and look at the domain, you will see now that Umbrella appears in the judgments and in the verdicts for this domain. Furthermore, if you click on the domain, you have new Umbrella options in the pivot menu that comes up. You can go to Umbrella Investigate for the domain view for the domain, and you can also block it by adding it to your DNS policy in Umbrella. There's one more module type that we can configure, but before we do that, let's have a look at one of these files and let's see what we know about it. We've got 2 judgments, 2 verdicts, 2 citings, and 5 indicators. Our judgments come from AMP File Reputation and AMP Global Intel. Now let's go and configure for ourselves one last module. And let's make that a Virus Total module. Now, Virus Total, you only have a couple options here. You can give it a name, and you can add your API key. Virus Total gives out API keys. Virus Total is not a Cisco product or service, but because they have an open API, Cisco Visibility can use your API key on your behalf to query Virus Total for any files that you look up in Cisco Visibility. To get a Virus Total API key, let's first go to virustotal.com. So go to virustotal.com and click on Join Community. You'll see this form to fill out. It's fairly straightforward. An email address, username, password, twice, all of that. Agree to their terms and click Join. And you will go through a fairly typical process where you'll get an email, you'll click on a link in the email, and then you're able to log in to Virus Total. Once you're actually signed in, go to your profile, go to Settings. Over on the left, go to API key, and grab your API key. Copy it. Back to the Visibility module configuration page, paste your API key in where it belongs and create the module, and see that here Virus Total is listed as finally the last module that we have configured in Cisco Visibility. And now let's go back to our investigation. And now I'm going to reload. And now we see that for several of our files, we do have Virus Total judgments. Each time one of their antivirus engines triggers on a file, that is a judgment, and that leads to a verdict that Virus Total can provide saying that this file is overall malicious based on the number of engines that triggered against it. That is the last of the modules we are going to cover in this tutorial. If you have followed along and configured them all, you now have access to 4 additional sources of world-class threat intelligence, pulling from both global external sources and internal monitoring data. Additionally, you now have 2 response capabilities built into your Visibility account, allowing you to block malicious files and malicious domains across your organization with just a few clicks. Feel free to watch the other videos in this playlist to learn more about what Cisco Visibility can do. Thank you for your interest, and I hope you find Cisco Visibility to be a time saver and a way to increase the functionality of your Security Operations Center using the resources you already have.